Hey guys, this is Billy from AdultCello.com, and today we've got part one of my 5,000 subscriber Q&A session. So Georgie and I here are very excited to answer your questions. I've got some really great questions written in. Let's dive right in. So here we go. This first one is from Amber. I was gifted a cello from a friend at Christmas. Who knows that cello is your favorite instrument? That's awesome. I'm 52 years old. I've not had a lesson. I'm trying to play enough that it will stay in tune for a few minutes. My question is, what are the top 3 to 5 things you would recommend to do to get started, I guess? I have a background in piano, but have not played in 25 years. I have a great ear, but not great in sight reading. Okay, that's a great question. So, honestly, if you're one of my top 3 would probably be to get, sign up for an online course, get a private teacher possibly if that's in your budget. I do think help at the start is a tremendous help, especially with something like the cello. There are certain instruments that I think lend themselves a little bit more to, starting on your own. The bow, pulling a sound, the bow hold, all those things are so complicated that I really would think about getting a teacher in the beginning. But so that's one, but I'll put an asterisk by that because you might be you're probably asking other things to do. One thing I would do is some ear training off the cello. I recommend this all the time, and I think it's one of the fastest ways to really highlight your ability to hear intervals. And on cello, if you're going to be playing notes and you're going to be playing in tune, you're basically going from note to note, and every time you do, that's an interval you've created. The interval basically is just the distance between any 2 tones. So if it's the exact same tone, you call it a unison, which is like just a G and then a G right after, and then that goes all the way up to, an octave and more. So getting that in your ear would be a great way to get started, and it's a great thing you can do when you're, bored in a waiting room. If you have earbuds, you can just do like a little quiz for fun. Another thing I would do is, what to get started? There's a lot. But once you feel like you have a bow grip that's, usable and pretty comfortable, I would just focus on pulling open bows on open strings. Okay, so that's, just going the length of the bow, if maybe not even the full length, but just trying to pull just kind of on each string, and you'll find that each string feels very different when you pull it with the bow because there's the A string is so thin, the C string is so thick, and the string tension's a little bit different on each string. So what's required out of your bow and your bow arm is a little different. If you can start linking those, open strings, open bows to your voice, I think that's a major step forward. When I say link to the voice, it's sort of about developing a sound concept that you want to carry on as like sort of a default sound. So when I play that's kind of my default sound that I want to go for, is something that's open. So the opposite of open, that's loud, but it's very pressed. So something like that. So that's something you could do kind of right away before you even have to get into left hand and playing scales, stuff like that. I think I'll stop there because I think that's really the first thing I would try to do. Then I would slowly just, add a D major scale 1 octave. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and just email me. Getting started, that's a very broad topic. So that's what I have to say about that. All right, let's move on to the next one. I have from Chen Wang, and this is, hi Billy, newish subscriber here, thanks, blah. I'm starting to learn double stops a couple weeks ago. I don't seem to have a solid grasp of how intervals should sound in my mind, so I get my teacher telling me go slightly sharper or flatter in the lesson, but I find it really hard to trust my ears if I'm in tune when I'm practicing on my own. You do have piano experience for more than a decade, So you could record things on the piano, but since the piano is tuned to equal temperament, it wouldn't be reliable all the time for helping train the ears for cello. Just saying that, you are on the right track. That's great. So I'd really love to hear how I developed ways to improve intonation, especially double stops. Okay, that's a really great question that opens up these like floodgates in my mind. So I'm going to try to give a coherent, helpful answer, but part of that answer would be investigating the main intonation systems we use. For me, that's equal temperament, which is like piano intonation. Every step is 100 cents. And then there's Pythagorean tuning, which is based on the overtone series, the perfect fifth. So a true perfect fifth is actually 702 cents versus 700 cents. So it's a tiny, tiny bit wider than perfect fifths on the piano. If you stack those perfect fifths, like A to E, E to B, B to F sharp, etc., you would then have all 24 pitches in a row, and they would in Pythagorean tuning, you don't adjust. It's just those are the pitches. Okay, that's kind of, people talk about that as like a sort of like melodic tuning, where usually the leading tones in a scale are a bit on the higher side to create that pull. So that's Pythagorean. And then there's just intonation, which is based on the harmonic overtone series, and that's what we're going to talk about mainly for double stops, because a big part of double stops is figuring out, it's two things. It's like, one is, what am I tuning to? So that could be like an open string. If you're playing two fingered notes in a double stop, I would try to get the lower note in tune, and then tune the upper note to the lower note. Okay, and lower in pitch. That's not absolutely always the case, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Developing your ear, that's so hard to do, because I remember it felt like the chicken and the egg, because it's like, okay, I'm ready to work on intonation, but I'm not sure I can hear it. So how do I improve what I can't hear? So if you want the Bible, this I actually was fortunate enough to study with Hans Jensen for a period of months, and I went through this book he wrote called Cello Mind. It's intonation and technique. This is not summer reading, okay? So do not take this to a beach and okay, I'm just gonna take this in really. You're gonna put in some work if you try to get information out of this thing. But having worked on that book, I feel rock solid in my understanding of pitch, where the notes need to be. I'm not saying I always put my finger there right away. It's always a work in progress, but I have a true understanding at this point, in my opinion, of where, how to tune to other people, how to tune to a piano, how to keep, how to have control of my intonation, okay? Assuming I practice very carefully. That's a huge step, because that was intonation double stops was always kind of like does that taste in tune? A little bitter? I don't know. It was very murky. And then working through that book, okay, I need this to land here. To the point where I can say, okay, I have my tuner on piano intonation, just a regular tuner. If my F sharp is 6 cents sharp to this tuner, then I know that is the Pythagorean F sharp I was talking about earlier, okay? And then the equal temperament F sharp is just whatever the tuner says. And then if it's 16 cents flat to the tuner, then I have my just intonation F sharp, okay? That's how deep I went, because I so didn't trust my ears. I did all the calculations so that I could use the tuner, play the note, and then listen to what it should sound like. And that was one of the things that really helped me get an understanding, was just okay, I know for a fact I'm hearing it correctly, because I just did all the calculations. Let's talk about what you can do today. If you're going to work on double stops to begin with, I would start with an open string. okay? Because that's just one less thing to worry about. If you have double stops with 2 fingers involved, either finger can go flat and sharp, so there's like a lot of ways to kind of have discrepancies. So I would just play, let's say on the D string, and you could start by just playing against the G string. Okay, so the G string will be open. So, how do you find that? For me, this is where, because I'm not talking about the tuner, I'm just going to talk about the sensation I get. It's almost like I hear the volume of the 2 notes increase because they're now kind of combined together and they make like this richer, kind of more open sound. Certain intervals are easy, the perfect intervals. For example, perfect fifth. That's very easy to hear because you just, it's like at the hospital, meh, there's just no, so you hear rawr, 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 rawr. So if it's out of tune, I hear beating, and then when there's like nothing going on, then you're in tune. Where it gets hard is 6 and thirds, and for that I would just kind of tune against one string and try to listen for that point when the 2 sounds kind of feel like they're merging into one sound. Okay? Keep in mind that double stops, the intonation is completely relative. So if you find the perfect, I'm going to play an E and I'm going to play it against the open G. Right, to me that sounds in tune. Now, if I play that against the open A string, not in tune. Is what I'm hearing, the beating between the 2 pitches. So I'm going to now, against the A string, I'm going to bring the E up. Now I hear the perfect fourth, that kind of stasis. That's right in tune, according to me. And then let's play it against the G string now. And again, I hear that because I raised it. So that, now I just showed you there are 2 E's just against the G and against the A string. The E on the D string can be tuned 2 different ways. So tune against one open string and then try the same thing, just walking up. You can walk up a scale, or you can go ahead and just walk up a chromatic scale and just try to tune each interval against the one open string you're trying. Okay, keeping in mind that the location, if you're doing it really correctly, the location for some of these notes will be totally different depending on which open string you're tuning to. Once you've done that, I would then, a thing I really like doing because it's kind of zen-y on top of being very helpful, is I would tune, let's say I'll take third position, and I would just tune hand shapes. So I'm tuning, let me show you what that means. Okay, I think my strings are old there, or, there we go. Okay, so I have my G I formed with the octave. Now if I just bar 1, I have a perfect fifth. Okay, now if I stay with the first finger on G and I just walk up, now second finger, minor sixth, major sixth, minor seventh, so that's your major seventh. That's that F sharp that is like reaching for the G. You can kind of hear it, just wanting to get that stasis of the perfect interval, the perfect octave. Okay, and then you could do the same thing. So that was first finger. You could do 2 against 1, 3, and 4. You could put 3 on the D string and do 1, 2, and 4. You do all these combinations, and then you could do the same thing on the A string, still in third position, and then nice juicy tritone, perfect fourth, major third, minor third. And just trying to locate that. That's a great way to really also get the spacing kind of dialed in. But again, first I would just start with the open strings. I hope that helps. If that didn't just bore you to tears, and if you want more videos on intonation, let me know. It's a topic that I think I see a lot of, when I talk about it in lessons, I see a lot of glazing over of the eyes often. I'm really into it, and it almost makes it worse because I'm getting even more excited about it. So I kind of avoid it in these videos to a degree because I worry that it's going to just bore people silly. But if it's something you want to hear about, let me know in the comments because I'd be happy to make more. This is from Bio, B-I-O, Bio. And I know this channel will only grow. Thank you so much. I'm one of the first 5,000. Thank you. I'm glad you subscribed. Appreciate it. And then, okay, have you had any plateaus in your playing ability overall? How do you overcome them to become better? Generally, I've simply practiced more and more through the mundanity until I can tell I'm getting better. Sort of like brute force, like forcing that improvement. I know about that. However, I'm not sure this is the best way to approach it. Thanks. What a great question. And yes, I've had plateau. I mean, at a certain point in the process, past a certain stage, you don't really just keep getting better as you play more and more. You have to do new things. So it's almost like a series of plateaus, unless you're just constantly making more and more progress. So if you ask if I've had plateaus, I've had tons of them. Some have been a few weeks long where I'm on a piece, I'm stuck, or I'm trying to figure out some kind of nuance and I just can't seem to get it. And then eventually I work my way out of it. Some have been months long, and it was maybe a mechanical issue I wasn't aware of yet. And so, for example, one I can mention right now just off the top of my head was that everyone was telling me to like sink into the string and to relax, right? So that translated to me for a little while of my right arm was just getting kind of lower and lower because I felt like, all right, now I'm really heavy in the string. Unfortunately, with my elbow way below my bow hand, that caused a ton of problems where I was basically skidding out constantly anywhere from like the midpoint of the bow to the tip, and it wasn't something I felt like I had control of. Even if I thought I was pulling a nice bow stroke, it would just kind of suddenly skip out on me. That's when I realized that, okay, my elbow needs to be high enough so that I can sink weight in throughout the length of the bow. So that was one plateau where I just was trying, oh my God, I was every finger, like, let me just figure out what's my first finger need to do, and I was just misdiagnosing the whole time. I took a lesson with someone, they told me to raise my right elbow, and I just like, boom, face palm, because it's just like, boy, would that have been helpful a few months ago. So anyway, I've had tons of plateaus. I think a good for adult learners especially, and driven adult learners, which it sounds like you are driven to succeed and to make progress, which I love. I constantly think about, I think it was Einstein who said the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's advice. It's very easy for me to give that advice. Sometimes it's not easy for me to follow that advice, but basically if you hit a plateau and you're past a certain level, you're out of the kind of beginner ranks and you're more like intermediate to advanced, one has to realize that you have to change something you're doing to get a different result. So maybe that's the approach you're taking to practice, maybe that's a mechanical issue, but it's more and more for me, it's about diagnosis versus putting in reps, because again, if you don't have the right setup or you're listening maybe for the wrong thing, you can just keep trying over and over again, and you're not going to make that kind of rapid progress, and you might at a certain point just kind of get stuck, and it can be very frustrating. So I would also say feel free to tear your playing down to the studs every now and then, which I've done many times in my journey, where I just go back to open bows, I kind of review the basics, kind of review what I've learned, and then suddenly, I just realized that I don't pull a straight bow these days. Like I don't know what, I don't know why I started pulling a crooked bow, but it's not straight now, and that's the problem. So that can help too. But you are not alone. I've been there many, many times. So just take my advice. If you have any questions, give me an email. All right. Okay, this is from the Barine Girl. I'm going to say some of these wrong. I'm sorry, but I'm trying. Okay, as a beginner, how often should you schedule a lesson with an instructor? Okay, that's a great question. In my opinion, with something like the cello, if you're going to be very regular, the time to do that is probably in the beginning. It's hard because a lot of people start learning and they're like, I don't even know if I want to do this. So I'm not sure I'm going to commit to weekly lessons. Maybe if I really get going, I'll start doing weekly lessons. The problem is, for a lot of people, including me, the way to really get going in the beginning is to take weekly lessons so that you make rapid progress. So, if it's within budget, I would say weekly is great. You also have to be realistic about how much you're practicing. So if you're going to sign up for weekly lessons, but then your schedule or your motivation has you practicing about a half hour a week, that might be kind of a waste of time. I'm a kind of person, I like to hit marks. Like I like to have the checklist and I say what I'm going to do for how long, and then I do that and I check it off and feel good. So what I would say early on in the journey, set an amount you're going to play, maybe even every day or every other day, something like that. And then commit to either weekly lessons or lessons every 2 weeks. That commitment will help motivate you to practice because you're paying for the lessons. And it's not like I'm going to feel embarrassed if my teacher doesn't see progress. It's just kind of a waste of money if I didn't practice between lessons. So that's what I would say. Weekly is a really good idea for people early on in their journeys. All right, so this question is from DW. Is there a particular kind of one-of-a-kind cello, single cello, like the Duport Strat, that one cello, the Paganini Strat, that has really captured your fancy, that you would love to have an opportunity to play? Or in a similar vein, is there a bucket list of cellos you'd like to play at some point, and why are they on your list? Either one of these questions, you'd like to hear my thoughts. Okay, great question, so fun. So I'm admittedly a total instrument nerd. It started when I first traded in. I had a rental cello, and then I was so smitten. A month in, I bought my first cello. The difference between the rental cello and the first real cello I purchased, I instantly sounded so much better. And then the next time I leveled up in instruments, the same thing happened, and I was just completely hooked because, it's just amazing to me that you can have a certain set of skills, and then you get on a certain level of instrument, and you have you upgrade your bow as well, and then you just sound better. And then the variation between all the types of sounds you can create, that and the cello has this like stock sound within it and it's unique. It's like a thumbprint. Each cello, because it's wood, it's organic. No two cellos are going to be the exact same. So that just fascinates me endlessly. To answer your question, I have had the opportunity to play on a few pretty incredible instruments. I played on a Guarneri for like 5 to 10 minutes, which was actually a little confusing. At first, I was completely in love. It was amazing. But it was hard. It was one of these cellos where the instant I'm bowing on it and playing a couple notes, playing maybe the opening of the Brahms Sonata, just trying it out, I realized, this would be one of those instruments I'd have to take home with me. It didn't happen, but I'd have to take home with me and really try to learn for a while, because it wanted to be played a certain way, and definitely wasn't the way I tend to play. So it would be kind of a project, but just a couple of the notes I hit, they were like unbelievable. I've played on a Nicolas Viome, which was the brother of Jean-Baptiste Viome. That was an incredible instrument. I've played on a lot of really expensive kind of French 1800s like Chanot, and I did get a chance to play a little bit on a Galliano a couple times, which is I think it was a Niccolo Galliano from, I think he was Cremona, but anyway, one of those old Italians. It's as advertised. It's pretty crazy how gorgeous. I remember one old Brescian cello from Brescia, Italy. I just bowed the C string, and it was so rich. It sounded like I was like doing vibrato on the C string because it was just like so old and resonant. Specific instruments, I've never played on a real Guadagnini. Those are interesting to me. They're a little smaller, but soloists today use them. They're smaller in size, I mean. So I'm just fascinated by, kind of what it would sound like. It's interesting with cellos. Sometimes the experience you get playing versus the experience the audience hears is very different. So a couple times I played a really expensive Italian cello from like the 1800s, and I was playing and I was just like, is this thing muted? Like, what's going on? And then I looked, and my wife is in the room near me, and just because it's so loud, but it was just kind of projecting outwards. So as a player, it wasn't an incredibly rewarding experience right off the bat because I'm not hearing as much. It was just kind of being sent outwards. And other times you play an instrument and it just sounds so rich and juicy and wonderful. And then I looked over, and whoever's in the room, it's usually my wife, and she's like, that's not very loud. And it's because all of it's kind of being, all the sound is just kind of right here, which as a player is fun because you're just getting all this feedback. It sounds great. But, if you had it in a circumstance where you need to, say, project over a piano, you might be in trouble because it's not pumping out sound. So, yeah. Guadagninis, if you have a Galliano or a Strad, and you would like me to try it, you just tell me where you are and I will come find you. I would love to. I love playing instruments. I would say also, to answer your question, that there's certain bows I would really like to get my hands on at some point. I think that can be as transformative, if not more so, than the instruments. So, I've always been interested. I played one Voisin once, which was a French maker. I think he was before Tort. Very light, but really like sticky on the string. It was very fun. And then, Picot, there's Tort. There's a whole list of bows I'd like to play too. All right, this is from Jenna. Congrats on 5K. Thank you so much. Okay, have you ever played as a street musician? I know sax players, fiddlers, even guitarists seem more natural as street musicians, but hey, time to come out of the orchestra closet. Okay, so that's a great question. I actually have. I've done some busking, limited amounts, but it worked. I mean, I was, the first time, it was very early on, so I was truly shocked that anyone gave me any money. I felt like I was, they might be more like they were going to pay me to stop playing when I first tried it. But I haven't done a ton of it, but here's what I would say. If you're considering doing that, let me give you a few tips. First off, some instruments are okay in the sun for a little bit. Cello is not one of those instruments. So aside from not wanting to just play in the sun because it's hot and uncomfortable, please be sure that you have like natural shade, or you have your own shade for the instrument if you're going to play outside, okay? Because the cellos can deal with heat and humidity to a degree, but direct sunlight is a no-no for basically any cello. The other thing I would say is, unless you have a bunch of solo repertoire, like maybe a couple Bach suites ready, or some melodies that kind of stand on their own well, what I see a lot of people do if they're playing in public just by themselves, what I see them do that works really well is you can get backing tracks if you're going to do pop songs, or you can try to see if there's some classical pieces, and you can find a piano accompaniment that you can have, and just bring like a speaker, and just pipe in some accompaniment that really helps. First off, I think it actually helps the player because it's just a little more support than just being there by themselves. But I think it's just a much more dynamic thing. The other thing I would say is that depending on where you're playing, where I did the busking was a place called 3rd Street Promenade in Los Angeles. It's very popular, very populated, lots of performers, kind of littered because it's, there's so many people there. So you definitely, in a situation like that, if you can, and if you have access to like some kind of pickup, which is like not necessarily a condenser microphone, because those you can have issues with feedback and stuff. But if you could get, a little like piezo pickup and attach it to the cello, and then that would just, run into a speaker, and then you could amplify yourself, that would help a lot as well. So that your sound carries, a pretty good amount. All right, that's part 1, and I'll see you next week for part 2. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much.